Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. You all are the conference warriors, sticking it out to the very end. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon session, those of you who are here and those of you who are joining us virtually. Welcome to Beyond the Site-Based Committee to How Micro-Communities Transform School Improvement. I am so happy to be here to introduce two of my friends, Cindy Gibson and Leslie Laughter, who are joining us here today. Leslie Laughter is the Chief Academic Officer at 806 Technologies, bringing 32 years of experience as a teacher, principal, and assistant superintendent. A visionary in school improvement, she inspires 806 Technologies' continuous improvement planning software used by thousands of school leaders. Her book, Continuous Improvement Without Continuous Stress, is available on Amazon and the 806 Technologies booth at this conference. She works alongside Chief Learning Officer Cindy Gibson, who has 30 years' experience in public and private schools and leads 806 professional learning team. Her work with AI integration is featured in the September 24 issue of Educate AI magazine. Together, Leslie and Cindy support state departments and districts with continuous improvement and compliance. Welcome, ladies. The floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. I just noticed the water down here. These are big jugs of water. Can you see them? We are very happy to be here. Just a little bit in addition to what Jules said about us, we both work for 806 Technologies, and we really have the best jobs in the whole company because our company is about software, and so we have a lot of programmers and that kind of thing, but Cindy and I get to work with schools, and that's the best part. So we do have the best job in our company. So today, we want to talk a little bit about this site-based committee. That's what we call them in Texas. In California, they're called, Can we switch that back, please? In California, they're school site councils. There we go, thank you. And in other states, they may have other names, but it's that required committee that I know all of you have that is made up of staff and parents, community members, sometimes students, and the purpose of those committees are to improve student performance. And we all have those, and we want to continue working with those. But as I was thinking about this, one of the things that I thought about was, when did all this start with a site-based committee? Does anybody have any idea when they were first mandated? Anybody want to make a guess? 1992 is when they were mandated in Texas. That's a long time ago. And I know we had them in place prior to that, but that's when the actual law came out at the state level saying you have to have this many parents and you have to have this many community members and so forth. So that was a long time ago. We know that it's important to work with our stakeholders. It's probably more important now than it ever has been, but it's also pretty difficult, isn't it? And so we want to talk a little bit today about what we can do to make things better working with our stakeholders. And I thought there's no better way to start this off than to talk about this thing. You see the connection between students and microwaves? Probably not. But you know, I learned something recently about a microwave. I learned that I've been using this thing for decades now, and I've been doing it all wrong. And I wonder how many of you might be doing it wrong. You know, we're from Texas, so I'm going to talk about a burrito. That makes sense to me. So when I get ready to put that burrito in the microwave, I open that door up and I stick it right in the middle of that microwave and shut the door, turn it on, and inevitably, what happens to me is I get a cold spot in my burrito. Does that happen to you? Yeah? How many of you put your food right in the middle of that microwave? Raise your hand when you open the door. I see you. You're doing it all wrong. Guess what? There is an actual owner's manual that goes with these things. How many of you have read it? How many of you even know where your owner's manual is for your microwave? Anybody? Yeah, I certainly haven't read it, and I don't know where mine is either. But guess what I learned? I learned that when we put the food in the middle of that microwave, we are actually fighting against the laws of physics. Because what happens is those microwaves come in from all directions, all over in that microwave. And when they meet in the middle, they cancel each other out. And that's why you have cold spots in your food. What we're actually supposed to do is to put it on the edge of that carousel. And it goes around and around, and it takes advantage of all those microwaves, and it doesn't cancel it out. And therefore, your food is much better when you put it on the edge than it is on the middle. So what does that have to do with site-based committee meetings and working with our stakeholders? Well, I think as educators, we're all just swamped all the time. All of us have more work to do than there are hours in the day. And so a lot of times we learn things maybe just at the surface level. We learn that we're supposed to have meetings with our stakeholders. We kind of understand that concept. We know what happened last year, and we just keep moving right on. Every year we're going to do the same thing. We have the same agendas. We set those meetings for the same times. We do what we think is best, but you know what? We're riding right at the surface. The meetings are good. We get good information out of it, but is there something that we can do that would be even more? So that's what our topic is for today. Would you agree with me that people are the greatest asset that any school has? Absolutely. People of all kind, our teachers, definitely our students, our parents, our community members, administrators, anyone who addresses or has any contact with our school can be an asset to our school. And so in this next generation, as things have changed so much from the time that I first walked into the classroom as a teacher, we need to start thinking about what this next generation means and what is it that we need to do in order to get more out of our stakeholders. So to do that, let's take just a minute and talk about our school community. Who are these people that are interacting with our schools, many of them on a daily basis? Who's there? So if we look at this from the perspective of generations, this is who is in our school. We have about 5 different generations right now in our schools. The one at the top, Generation Alpha, these are our youngest stakeholders, and currently they're our elementary students. They're called Generation Alpha. Next to them would be our secondary students, and they are our Generation Z. We have plenty of millennials. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about these in just a moment. We have Gen X, and then right down here at the bottom, we have baby boomers. And we have lots of baby boomers who are already retired, and those that are still in the school, they're moving out. That generation is at a time where they're supposed to be enjoying retirement. Now, I happen to be one of those boomers, and I failed at that. I haven't retired yet. But a lot of those boomers are moving out. So let's look a little bit deeper. I talked just a minute ago about who our students are in these 2 generations. And I've given you just a little snippet of some of the characteristics that we see in students, especially as it relates to technology. And you know that our youngest students are growing up in a world of AI. They don't know anything different. They're hearing AI. Their worlds are going to be just totally immersed in AI. Our Gen Z students are learning about it. It's still something that's a little bit new to them. But they're going to quickly be able to adapt and use AI. One interesting thing about this group is that they really crave authenticity. This is the group who are the children of parents who posted everything. Their parents posted every time they had breakfast and what they ate for breakfast and then what they did in the middle of the afternoon. And so that's kind of pushed this generation of students into a little different thinking. They really want that authenticity. Now, when we look at parents and our staff, our teachers and others, they generally fall in these three areas. We have some that are Gen Z, because that, according to this resource that I used, that goes up to about age 29. And so we could easily have parents that are in that category. Now, you know that if you look at 2 or 3 references, they do generally have some different ages in there. But for today's session, we're going to say that Gen Z, goes up to about age 29. A lot of parents are millennials, and we have parents who are in the Gen X era as well, and educators fall in this group. Then down towards the bottom here, we have another group that we also have to consider, and that's grandparents. We have quite a few grandparents who are now guardians of children, and they're coming through schools again. They've already had their children who have gone through school, and now they're raising those grandchildren, and so we need to think about that group as well. And then our boomers, and I want to make sure that you remember a little bit about the boomers and that era, because boomers are very loyal. That's the generation that when they got one job, they stayed in that job clear through retirement. They're very loyal. They love structure and rules and those kind of things. And guess which one of these groups wrote the rules for our site-based decision making? Yeah, it's right there, isn't it? And since the time those site-based committees were mandated, very little has changed. The structure hasn't changed very much, and often you find the same kind of format. We want to have a face-to-face meeting with our stakeholders. But look how many other generations we have in there. And if you kind of glance through some of the things that are on this slide, you see that face-to-face isn't always what some of these others prefer. So what can we do to make sure that we are engaging the people who are involved in our schools? Because we want more of that. We want more connections and deeper connections with the people who are in our schools. So when I go back to this again, one of the typical things that happens with site-based committees is we know we have to have one. We have a set number of meetings. The district will set a certain number, or the state. And so what we do is we set the meeting, we set the agenda. But if we're going to make a difference with different stakeholders, I want us to think about this just a little bit differently. What if we did this instead? Instead of starting with, this is when we're going to meet, this is when we're going to bring this committee in, and let's build our agenda, what if we started with, what do we need to learn? We all have state assessment data. We have local data. We know how our students are performing. But within that information that we have cold spots, don't we? Where we don't have information that we need. So what if we started before we even set up a meeting and we said, okay, what is it that we want to learn? Then we could go into the step of who needs to be there, what does that need to look like, and how are we going to do this? There's a book out by Priya Parker, and it's called The Art of Gathering. Have any of you read this? Oh, great. That's a great book, isn't it? One of the things that she says in there is that we have all kinds of reasons for meeting and coming together. And many times when we do that, people are coming for different reasons. But one of the most important things about meeting is we have to be crystal clear with our focus on why we want to meet. Because if we're not, then we're going to have a hodgepodge of things. And we're going to end up with those site-based meetings where we just set the meeting, set the agenda, invite people, and have a few questions, and then we're dismissed. So we want to make sure that we are crystal clear with why we are meeting. So to do that, I wanted to take a look at these two terms, committee and community. Those two terms seem pretty similar. And I mean, they almost even look similar when you look at them in print there, but they're miles apart in their definition and their meaning here. Because when you look at a committee, it's a very short-term kind of thing. It's a group of people, and they're appointed for something specific. So those would be the people that would be expected to be invited to a meeting. There's going to be an agenda. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to dismiss. But in today's world, I think we need more in our schools. What we really need is this definition of community, because we want our parents to be engaged. We want grandparents to understand school and feel welcome there. We want our staff to be involved, and we want to hear from our students as well. So there's a big difference here between committee and community. And community is what we want to talk to you about this afternoon. So when we're thinking about these site-based committee meetings, or whatever your district calls them, we're not saying do away with them at all. That's not the case at all. Our title was Beyond the Site-Based Meeting. We know that those are essential, and we know we get good information from them, but what we want to do is we want to reach deeper so that we can extend and get better collaboration and cooperation and community out of this group. So with our next generation, we want to have purpose first. Then we can decide, and our outcomes. That goes along with our purpose. What is our outcome? Then we can decide, how does that happen? Who did we need to invite? What format and what that is going to look like? So, what in the world is a micro-community? What does that mean? Here are 5 examples of micro-communities, and in just a moment, Cindy's going to come up and we're going to talk about each one of these. I don't want you to sit there and look at that and think, oh my goodness, there's 5 more things that we need to add on to what we're doing, because that's not what this is at all. These micro-communities are specialized groups that we want to engage, we want to involve, and we want to make sure that they are part of our improvement planning process by bringing us information and by giving us things that we don't have access to otherwise. Each one of these can be implemented individually. There's no order in here. Anyone can come first. And these 5 might not even be the 5 that you need the most. They're the most common, but your particular school might have a different group that comes to the surface first that you need as a micro-community. So we're going to talk about each one of these and how that might look as far as pulling groups of people together. Who would that be? How would you do it? What tools are there that we can use to help us make sure that we are meeting the needs of the generations that are in our schools? And most importantly, how do we do this where this is not an add-on? Because we don't want that. What we want is for these micro-communities to be embedded into the regular rhythm of the work of the school. And you can do that just by looking at what your activities are that you already have in place. And as Cindy explains these to you in just a moment, I know you're going to see when she talks about several of these, you're going to say, oh my goodness, we already have this. And as she does that, I want you to think about how that particular group is operating and how they are connecting back to your school improvement. What kind of information can come out of what they're doing that can feed into your needs assessment? What kind of information can help you fill in some of those cold spots in student performance or some of those areas where you have questions? So it's all about just shifting our mindset a little bit into thinking how we can work smarter instead of working harder. And that's what the purpose of these 5 micro-communities are. So with that, I'm going to let Cindy take the lead.
Thank you. Hello. They need like espresso shots when you come into the 4:15 session, right? Maybe we can work on that next time. I love what Leslie said about this all not being an add-on and it being just embedded. And so part of what we're going to look at is how to make these embedded micro-communities, also be efficient to plan, meet all of your generation's needs that are represented there. And we're going to look at some really cool ways to use AI to do that. Oops. All right. So the first community is the data and evidence community. And this community is going to ask questions like, what patterns are we seeing across the data, all of our multiple data sources? Which groups are we involving, and who's improving, who's stagnating, who is maybe declining? This group asks questions like, what factors beyond academics are contributing to these patterns we're seeing? And really importantly, where do our perception data and our performance data disagree? That's a critical question to ask in this. And as we prepare to answer these questions, we should examine our micro-communities to see what systems are we using, what opportunities are we providing to honor the perspectives and the views and the systems that the different generations represented are used to. So building trust is a really critical piece of this. I know my kids at home are always joking with me, like, I think there's even a thing out there where they go, oh, that's such a boomer thing. I'm not a boomer, I'm Gen X, but they're like, that's such a boomer thing. I don't know. So we really have to work hard across the generations to, I see some smiles out there. Do you get this from your kids? Like, you're such a boomer, or why don't you know this? Yes, I see heads shaking. So it is important that we are building trust with them by looking at the ways that they learn, what they're used to, the meaning behind, the purpose behind why they do what they do. So we really want to honor their perspectives. And analyzing through the lens of curiosity and not compliance will also lower guards and open up minds, and keeping those conversations really focused on the deeper purpose. If we focus on checking those surface level boxes and we're lifting up compliance continually, if we're weaving that into all of our conversations and throughout a whole conversation, then, we may have all the ingredients for the burrito, but the center is probably going to be cold. So before we talk about this anymore, I want to show you some AI pieces, but I want you to think, as you're looking at how AI can serve and help in this community, what are ways that we could normalize AI for all generations? Some of them, it's very natural, they expect it, but some of them are going to be reluctant, and we need to really kind of nurture that and help them just normalize the use of it. So this first one here, and I'm going to have to read some of these prompts for you. I see it's real small for you to see, so I have my printed paper here, and I'll read the prompts to you. But this one is something I fed into Claude. I just asked, where do I even start with multi-generational honoring systems? Like, how would I have a community gathering where I can honor all of those systems? So you could use ChatGPT, you could use Claude, you could use Google Gemini or Copilot, but the prompt that I put in here was, assume the role of a K-12 administrator. Your data and evidence community is gathering. I also entered the definition of data and the data and evidence community. And then I asked it, what is a good system for gathering based on all the generations represented? And I took a snippet of the slide that Leslie had earlier showing all those different generations and how they operate, and dropped that in there. So here's what it does. All right, so it's going to come out. It takes, like, as you know, how many of you use AI for? Yes, lots of things. So it's going to start spitting out all sorts of things. So it says multiple ways to engage. Is our video going here? There we go. So it spits out and talks about multiple ways to engage. Boomers prefer face-to-face. Gen Z and millennials are comfortable with digital platforms, so consider hybrid meetings. It talks about boomers and Gen X appreciating clear structure and processes. Well, we think everybody appreciates that, but specifically those groups. Allow millennials and Gen Z to bring innovative approaches to data, like digital tools, new interpretation methods, maybe some AI. Leverage Gen Z's independence and resourcefulness by pairing them up with Gen Z members. So I hadn't even really thought about that. A lot of times we're looking at grade levels or content areas or things like that, but if we paired people by their different generations so that they could leverage each other's strengths. Millennials and Gen Z are very purpose-driven, so every data review sessions should explicitly connect findings to student outcomes, which we should do anyway, but we want to make sure that we're really lifting up what does this mean for our students. So it's just spitting out all of this information here, even much more than what I've just shared. I then asked it to just summarize all of that into an actionable gathering plan, which it did. And it said it had an agenda with systems for walking through this data that could honor all of the generations. It talks about face-to-face connection time, in-person or on camera, quick wins, sharing the data digitally 48 hours before the meeting. Interesting. Small group breakouts with mixed generational pairs, connecting findings directly to student impact. So it's walking through this whole agenda. Lots of great information there. So it even gives you non-negotiables, a clear agenda set 3 days ahead. Who has Fidelity when they do that? How many people got Fidelity there with 3 days ahead? Are you making the agenda 10 minutes before? Sometimes that's the case. So this is an opportunity to really bring that meaning and get ahead of that. All right, let's look at another way that we can support the data community with using AI. So this is a good opportunity to ask Gen Z to run anonymized data through AI to synthesize large data sets. They can do this faster than I can change my Google Meets background. True story, and I think a couple of my team members are listening virtually, so they can attest to this too. We were just messing around in a meeting once using the AI Google background creator, and it was around November, so I asked AI to create a background for me of turkeys on the beach. And it did. It was quite funny. Some of them were sunbathing and parasailing. And then a few days later, I forgot about the background until I was interviewing a candidate, true story, for a position, and he showed up in a suit, and I showed up with my turkeys in bathing suits, drinking beachy cocktails. So it's crazy how quickly you forget where all the buttons are and how to change something when you're in that situation. But thankfully, he had a sense of humor. So this document right here, back to the data analysis, a large data set, it has 3 different benchmarks showing the same standards being tested throughout the year. How many of you sit down with these sometimes or have teams that sit down and start to analyze this type of data or have growth data? Yes, I see some head shaking. So you could sit down, and this could be like the traditional committee might be sitting down and looking at this type of data set. But instead, you could feed this anonymized into an AI system, ChatGPT, Claude, any of the ones we talked about, and ask it to provide you with some summaries. So let's just see what that looks like right here. I'm going to read the prompt to you. I dropped that document in, anonymized data, into AI, and I said, I am an elementary school principal. I need to analyze this data to determine which teacher's class had the most growth by learning standard on the 3 reading snapshots throughout the year. Compare snapshot 1 learning standards to the same standards in snapshot 2 and 3 to determine growth by student. Then group the students by instructor name. And I gave it a few other little pieces before I said, make a bar graph showing all of this, right? So you can see here, it is working on that, and it did create a very colorful bar graph, and it told me how it did it, just to confirm that it produced what I was looking for. So there's the bar graph. Let me show you what it looks like here. Imagine having this before you sit down. Instead of having a committee that's analyzing data, you now have a community who is ready to engage in deeper conversations, and it's going to bring a lot more meaning to the table. This one shows the teachers. It was grouped by teacher in my prompt. So it shows the teachers at the bottom here, and then the standards are color-coded. And so you can immediately see trends. Is AI always right? No. Are humans always right? No. But when you're doing trend work, it's usually going to point you in the right direction. I also flipped it on its head and asked it to put the standards at the bottom and then color code the teachers. Could we have better conversations as a community if we walk in with this data? Or, like ChatGPT suggests for multi-generational meetings, communities, send it out 3 days before. Run it through, send it out 3 days before. Has anybody tried this before, putting data in? Nice. This one is showing just math proficiency, trends, so taking growth data over 3 years and putting it in there. Imagine the conversations that could come around that one with the data community. All right, so next is the student voice community, and this one taps into student authenticity, really guiding instruction to reflect the real needs, the real learning needs. Teachers and principals cannot solve problems that they don't know about, and adults will never be able to fully understand students' needs unless they ask. So we really need to ask those questions. We need to engage the students, because some kids just get really good at doing school instead of actually learning. They follow directions, they fill in the blanks, they get A's, they do what they're told. So this community comes together to ask things like, what changes do students believe would make the biggest difference? And what barriers do students see in their own learning and engagement? And where do student perceptions differ from adult assumptions? Implementing student voices enriches educational strategies, and it really fosters the ownership of learning for those students. You've heard of voice and choice. We talk about that a lot. But who's the one designing? Who's designing the choices that students get to make? It's usually the adults, right? So what if we flipped that on its head? Instead of voice and choice in your learning, what if it was sharing and shaping your learning? And to do that, we have to be able to get feedback from them. And so let's look at a couple platforms that can help you do that. One of them is called AHA. Does anybody have experience with AHA? Okay. Funny side story. I put AHA in the notes, and Leslie thought that I had an AHA moment when she was reading through, which we did. We had a little AHA moment. So AHA, this is just a quick video showing the very basic free version of AHA, but it's basically crowdsourcing for ideas. So with parent permission and student permission, and good structures and systems, you can use AHA to actually collect ideas. Obviously, we want a moderator, because anytime you give high school students or middle school students a place to write comments on things, you know how that goes. So just be monitoring. But it's a great system where it shows, all the ideas that are being offered, opportunities for people to vote on those, for students to vote, for them to ask questions about it, for them to make comments. So just a neat platform. You can see here I'm making comments. You can see over on the left, it's a full list of the different ideas that have come up. These could be initiatives, these could be adjustments, these could be clubs, these could be really any idea that students think about. All right, and then another opportunity for really honing in on student voice, and really this could be a good one for the family meetings as well. This is where, it's called Fireflies. It's a little bit like Otter. It's a meeting transcriber, but in addition to transcribing the meetings, it summarizes and it gives a to-do list based on what was discussed, and it measures sentiment. So you can look and see there was some negative sentiment at this point in the meeting, and you can go back and look and see what was the discussion and why might it be registering a negative sentiment. So you could have really students who are very agreeable about the discussions and then later realize that the sentiment was not there. So that's called Fireflies, just another way to capture student voice and choice, or sharing and shaping their learning. Okay, the third micro community is implementation community. And this group takes the plan or the playbook and they make sure that it's implemented. They don't serve as judge and jury, they're cheerleaders, they're support, and they're just making sure that they are supporting and cheering on the implementation of those plans. They also make sure all the professional learning occurs and that all the resources are in place as planned. They ask questions like, what does good implementation look like? What does it look like in the classrooms? What does it look like on the teams? What barriers are the staff experiencing? How do we know implementation is improving practice and not just compliance? So there's a lot of opportunities here to use AI, like turning plan into clear, actionable checklists. You could just feed your plan into one of your AI platforms and ask for actionable checklists. Draft observation look-fors based on plan strategies, which we'll look at in just a second. And then even summarizing implementation across teams so you can see trends. It's very good at trends. So to implement and support, everyone has to know what they were actually implementing, right? So use AI to make your plan. This could be your district plan, your department plan. If you're at a school or you're supporting schools, this could be your school plan. Turn it into an infographic that you can post in classrooms and public spaces so that everyone can see, families, anyone who's on your site. It seems like a really simple thing, but when someone sits down to do it, maybe the younger generations are going to create these things much quicker, but ChatGPT can do it in under 3 minutes. And in this example here, I've fed the plan into ChatGPT, just a printed plan, and it was in color, so it was downloaded in color, so it knew that the logo was gold and black. So it also produces the infographic in the school colors, so you can tell it what school colors you want. But the prompt that I said was just create a simple one-page infographic of the goals in this plan. And there's so much power in walking through a department, walking through a district, walking through schools and seeing what are the goals. They're just front and center for everybody. So while this is working on creating the infographic, you can see it's starting to generate it now. Just true story, I was in Frisco ISD. It's a large North Dallas district before I came to 806. And we were working, I worked with principals on their plans. And one of the principals said to me one day, everybody from central admin comes out here with their agenda. They come out here with their list that they're going to every school to implement their agenda, the curriculum coordinator, whoever it is. And she said, is there anywhere at central admin where you have posted the goals for my school? Do they even know what the goals are when they come out? Or are they just coming with their agenda and not even knowing if there's alignment, right? So this is a good opportunity too. I mean, if I was at a school right now, I'd be doing this and I'd be sending it to my helpers at central admin too. So while AI is working on finishing this up, have a conversation with your neighbor, if you've got one near you, about how the information gained from this implementation community could benefit your site-based committee requirements. We'll just take 30 seconds on that. Or if you're sitting alone, you can just think it. Thank you for engaging. And if you're finished having conversation, you can see up here what was produced in 2 minutes and 45-ish seconds just by dropping a plan in. And it has the 6 goals there. It did add this random box at the bottom about closing middle grade math gaps. It wasn't one of the goals in the plan, so I just said remove that, and it did, and we were good to go. All in all, like a 4-minute activity. And now I can print this for my wherever I'm posting it. Has anybody ever used ChatGPT or Claude to create an infographic? I got an AI person right there. Yes, she is busy with AI. We, in another session at a different time, some people in the group started feeding in like their new dress code and things like this, and it created infographics. It was pretty cool. Okay, so another piece that you could do is add your plan to AI and ask it to create a walkthrough look-fors, because in the implementation community, you're wanting to make sure that what is actually in the plan is getting implemented. And this is, there is an element of teacher evaluation to that, but really we're looking at are the strategies that we've said we're going to do, are they happening, and how do we know? So in this scenario, the prompt says, need my glasses. The prompt says you're a K-12 administrator doing MOY classroom walkthroughs to ensure the strategies in the school plan are being implemented effectively. Read the strategies in this plan and provide a list of look-fors during the walkthrough. It's doing that right now. I loaded a plan in, and one of the strategies that it focused on was redesign the master schedule to prioritize math instruction with a longer protected block. So that was a strategy in the plan. It started with that one, and it started producing look-fors. What look-fors could we see to make sure that the master schedule has been reorganized, redesigned to prioritize math instruction with longer protected blocks? So it said things like, math class, it's not just on paper that you're seeing it. Math instruction's not being shortened due to announcements, assemblies, or testing. Lesson structure shows intentional chunking of the longer block. Asking questions like, could this lesson have happened the same way in 45 minutes versus the longer block? Students can explain what they're learning. They're not disengaging halfway through, now that the lesson's longer. Lesson plans show intentional use of extended time, not just extra practice. Teachers can articulate how the schedule change has impacted instruction. So really cool list of look-fors here. And then it's really comprehensive. But then I thought, really, like Leslie mentioned earlier, we're trying to answer questions here. We're figuring out what are the right questions to ask and how do we answer those. So I just asked it then, what questions should be answered as I walk through? I love this part. It says, and you might be able to read some of that up there, is math time clearly protected and extended in practice, not just paper? Does this lesson look intentionally designed for a longer block, or is it padded? Are there avoidable interruptions? How is the lesson structured across the block? Is the pacing purposeful, or is engagement dropping midway through? Ask the teacher, what part of the lesson benefits most from having more time? Ask yourself, would removing the extended block significantly weaken this lesson? Is instruction deeper than it would have been earlier this time last year? So really good things to think about just to get you started so that you can go deeper faster, which is really what micro-communities are about, going deeper and making sure that we're really looking at those meanings purposefully. All right. Can anybody, who can read that? Who can read that? Got a major glasses going on. Okay, so next is the family and community engagement piece. And this group is one that helps the school break free from the old site-based committee, that format that we're just so used to from Boomer Design. And finding the right mix for this group takes time. And what works won't always be the same. It won't stay the same. It may change. So one important factor to consider is that families show up when you're focused on their child, not the institution. So they engage more when the barrier to entry is low. You know this. When the setting feels familiar. You know this too. Everyone's worked hard at some point on family engagement. And it takes consistency and clear and easy to understand communication. So think about how information gained from a family and community engagement piece, like a gathering, might apply to your current site-based decision-making committee requirements. We're going to look specifically at how AI can help, but thinking about how can we focus on the child and making this meaningful. A cool piece that I found, do you guys know George Couros? I'm sure everybody's heard of George Couros. He's the author of many books, but Innovator's Mindset is one of his first ones. Excuse me. And he was modeling how to collect and synthesize feedback applied in various scenarios. So he had a virtual gathering, and the question that he posed to the whole group, you could do this virtually or on site, responding in a Google form. He said, what are the biggest challenges around AI you are experiencing in your district and that you would like addressed in this live virtual event? So translate that into maybe a parent community event, right? What things would you like addressed here? Once the feedback was given on a Google form, you can see he collected it on a Google sheet here. Then he asked it to categorize it all into 3 buckets. And then he asked it to come up with 3 questions to address, 1 for each bucket. And I'll bet we could do that same thing for any community. It would be especially cool with this family and community one. But think about the power in everyone providing their input on what they would like addressed, showing how their input is actually not a siloed concern or issue or request, but they're seeing it grouped together, paired up with other families who have the same feedback. So it's now grouped, and now you have 3 questions to answer during this community time together, how they will feel heard and how you can go deeper so much faster. And this is what it looks like when he did it. This is a real quick video. It had all of these 85 pieces of feedback. Take the following prompts and summarize them into 3 categories. It takes, like 5 seconds to do that. And then he said, what question should we be answering based on these prompts? And there's the 3 main questions that they're going to talk about in their community. It happens really quickly, and you could do that right at the beginning. So can you see how his idea could be applied to any of these scenarios here? I'll give you a quick minute just to read over those. Will you just turn to the person next to you, or if you're sitting at a table by yourself and you just want to think, how does the depth of information gained using this method benefit this community as opposed to the typical site-based decision-making committee? Is this an idea anybody might use? Even for your staff. All right, finally, the last, I went too far. The last micro-community is the leadership alignment community. Their primary role is direction, coherence, and decisions. And this community focuses on what leaders need to do to create conditions for success. So they're asking questions like, are we clear and aligned on our priorities and on our non-negotiables? Are we protecting time, focus, and resources for what matters most? What decisions should be made once and honored everywhere? How are we communicating the why? So they're asking these types of questions. And leadership alignment and implementation are linked. Remember, we had the implementation community. They're linked, but they're different. And primarily because if alignment is weak, implementation gets chaotic. So let's look at the differences here, and then we're going to have Leslie wrap us up and close out. Oops. All right, so leadership alignment versus implementation. Are we leading in the same direction? So leadership, I got my mouse going all over the place here. Thank you. So you might be looking at these two and thinking, what is the difference? But alignment without implementation, that's going to produce some great plans, but what kind of impact? Little impact, right? On the other hand, implementation without alignment produces a lot of good hard work, but probably scattered results. So we need to think about the information coming from both of these communities. You probably have these going on already at your schools and your districts. So think about, how does the information gained in this alignment community apply to your site-based decision-making committee requirements? You can see that we're hitting compliance here, but we're not talking about compliance. If we're always putting compliance front and center, then we're going to get that cold burrito, right? We're going to hit all of our checklist items, but we'll have the cold burrito. All right. Which community resonates most with your schools or districts' current challenges? Will you show me, just let's number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and show me on your fingers kind of which one is resonating with your current challenges the most? 4, I see 2s, 3, a little bit of all at 5, 4. Thank you. All over the place. That's great. Not really. I mean, we don't want you to have all the challenges, right? But now you've got some strategies that can support you with that. Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap up this part of it with just a few minutes, probably 3 minutes of thinking about kind of 2 different options here. One is thinking about one system issue, which you already had on your mind because you showed me with your fingers. And then mapping out how each micro-community, just quickly jotting down how each micro-community could contribute to solving it. And identifying just one first next step to take back to your school or district. Once you're there and you're doing that work, you'll debrief and share across groups, look for commonalities and some innovative ideas. But just quickly going through those steps, or you could use the micro communities readiness tool. It's in your handouts on the app, and it looks like this. This is another option if you want to open that up and look at it. So we'll take less than 3 minutes to just work through this, and then Leslie's going to wrap us up.
Hopefully that's given you a little bit of time to think about making a shift from just our traditional thinking about site-based committees into more of a community. And you know, this shift is a culture shift. It helps us move from improvement planning as being compliance and being the responsibility of the administrator to one that everyone can embrace, because what we really want is for this to be embedded into the natural rhythm of everything that's happening at school. creating a school where everybody feels a shared responsibility is not easy, is it? Because teachers have heavy loads, administrators have heavy loads, and there's lots of things that are going on. But if we can take one small step at a time, we can grow these micro communities, and over time, then you'll see that people do start feeling more ownership, and you'll find that improvement planning is a much easier responsibility. So, and I said this earlier, but I want to emphasize again that the goal of looking at micro communities is not to add more meetings. Nobody needs to attend another meeting. But it's a mind shift to think about what things are already occurring at your school and how can you take those great activities and pieces that are already there and feed that back into your needs assessment, bringing that information back so that everything is seamless together. And so that just takes a mind shift there. And just a little bit of time in thinking about where you want to start with that. So begin small, just think about one area, and work on that until that seems to be working well. Here are two things that we hoped that you would walk away from this training with. And the first one in our key takeaway here is by leveraging these micro communities, we can create stronger stakeholder engagement. That's what it's all about, is getting people to believe in what we're doing, to embrace what we're doing, and to support us with that work. So that helps us to increase student achievement. But the second thing that we hope that you will walk away with this is in thinking about how we engage with our stakeholders. It shouldn't be stuck in the 1990s boomers era, that there are lots of different ways that we can embrace our stakeholders and get them involved in school and in our communities. So those are two things that Cindy and I were thinking about, but we're hoping that maybe you've thought of some other things. So what I'd like for you to do, if you will, is just stand up, and I'd like for you to find somebody in the room that maybe you haven't talked to today and share with them one thing that stood out to you, just one little thing that you want to remember about micro communities and where you might take that first step at home in creating a little bit different approach to involving more stakeholders in our schools. So would you do that? Would you just stand up and find someone and tell them just one thing that you want to remember in being here this afternoon? Would you finish your thought, please? And thank your friend for visiting and sharing your ideas. I think it comes down to this, that when we are very intentional and we utilize our greatest asset, which is our stakeholders, and that's a variety of different people, then engagement deepens, connections strengthen, and our students can thrive. So that's the whole purpose in rethinking how we might address our traditional site-based committees. So we want to thank you again for attending, especially this time of the afternoon. You truly are the heroes by staying this late. Cindy will be here and stick around for a little bit. I actually do have a book signing that is on your way out. If you go around the corner and go right down the escalator, the book signing is right there, and then back up the escalator out on the way out. And I do have a few books if you're interested in that. Otherwise, you can find it on Amazon. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoy your conference, and I just appreciate your time. Bye-bye.